Thank you, Lucille. And Mirjam and I have also really been looking forward to this. And I know that you asked us how you can introduce us, and we didn't really give you an answer. But maybe maybe the best way is to say we're both kind of recovering overthinkers. I think we both come from that place of wanting to figure everything out. And I for a long time I kind of believed my body only existed to carry my head around. So we're both recovering from that. And that's kind of where what we want to share with you today was born, was in our own journeys. But maybe, so today we're going to be exploring awakening or perhaps deepening complexity consciousness. And maybe just as a caveat, I didn't come up with that. It's something that I discovered a few months ago in a Stanford article, and it just really resonated with me. And since then, I've kind of come up with my own definition of it that we'll share with you later. But just as a start, to position this, I thought I would share with you this quote. So it's by Michael Meade. He is a mythologist. I think that's such a cool title. I wish I could call myself that. And he says, to be alive in this time is to be in the liminal phase of a collective rite of passage. And there's so much here, there's so much to unpack. But why I wanted to start with this is because I think it highlights a bit of a critical, like a tension that many of us are sitting with, so maybe just to look at the different words. So collective means we're all in this. It's a collective thing. Everybody that's alive is in this. It's liminal. So it's misty, it's messy, it's, something old, the old ways are dissolving and we don't really know what's coming next. We're in that messy middle. And it's a rite of passage, which I find really hopeful. Rites of passage, it speaks of some kind of a maturing. It's a coming of age, so it's a significant transition. So there's something here about a collective maturing. And so in this time between worlds, where I find myself and where many of my coaching friends also find themselves, is we are not just guiding or accompanying others in this transformation. We're living it. We're in it. We're also in the messiness. We're in the ways that we've been doing things are no longer working, and we also need to find our way. And so, many people describe this as, it's discombobulating and we feel unmoored and it feels like there's no solid ground to stand on. And whereas in the past, perhaps we coached from a place of being just slightly more rooted, now we're in the flux with our clients. I don't know if that resonates. And the best we can hope for is to maybe be, like half a step ahead. And so, as I said, Mirjam and I kind of both come from a place of wanting to understand complexity. So many of you, would know me from, I've been working in the field of complexity for many years, and probably I'm most well known in the field of, or in the space of Cynefin. And a few years ago, I started realizing that, people don't need to be taught about complexity. They don't need to, listen to me for hours. And it can be useful, but it's not enough for us to just understand what complexity is or to be able to situate it in a framework. We need to understand that it is something that we live, that we're entangled with, that we can't separate ourselves from. And it's something that we're entangled with every single day. And so working with Mirjam and I have been working together, sure, Mirjam, is it 18 months more, 2 years? I almost can't remember.
Yeah, 2 years.
And yeah, it's been really helpful for me because I had to let go of identities around, being a complexity expert, of knowing what I'm doing. Lucille, you spoke about, showing up and, sounding clever, all of these things I needed to let go of and go into the very uncomfortable territory of discovering my body, learning to trust my intuition, and not only doing it for myself, but actually showing up like that with clients. And I found that took a lot of courage because, it's when we're in that kind of messiness, in that messy middle, it can start to feel as if it challenges our sense of confidence, our sense of competence, our sense of, this is what our clients come to us for, and now we don't know. And so none of us have arrived. This isn't a new certification. It's a practice. It's a way of staying more awake and aware and adaptive in the midst of change. And so today is not about us talking about complexity. It really is about us giving you an experience. And yeah, just, going through that messiness of just being in the unknown. But before we get there, and before I hand over to Mirjam, this notion of complexity consciousness, I want to just put a slide up, and I'll give you just a bit of time to just read through the different statements there. Because for us, this is what I believe we're being called into. I don't know what the new is that's emerging, but I sense that it has to do with surrendering, not efforting so much, learning to trust our intuition, spanning boundaries, all of these things that can be quite uncomfortable. And for us to show up, I guess, more as tuning forks and not as conductors. And so this is the definition for me, how I make sense of complexity consciousness. So I'm not going to speak through this. I'm just going to let it come on screen. And then I'm going to hand over to Mirjam.
Yeah, thanks, Sonja. Maybe it's just still helpful just to quickly run through this entanglement, and then I'll pick it up from there. Just to give some some texture to this slide. I
I'm
see
just
it's
going to let it.
slowly emerging.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I thought I wouldn't let the whole thing come up and just let people kind of read it.
Yeah, let's just give it a minute or so for people to just read this. Yeah, and maybe what's just helpful to add here is that so today we're not here to talk about complexity. We're really here today to feel what it's like to stand inside of it, and not as coaches, but as humans. Because our sense is that the kind of trust that we need to meet these times doesn't come from our mind, right? It doesn't, it's supposed to come from our body, from our nervous system. And yet, what many of us are experiencing is that we're moving through life in systems, whether that's inner or outer, that are overwhelmed, that are under-resourced, and that are dysregulated. So what we thought would be good to do before we try and reach language, before we unravel this concept of complexity consciousness, and before we try to make meaning or help others find it, we wanted to start here with ourselves. Because what does it feel like to be in this time between worlds, or rite of passage, as Sonja described? And from our experience, it's that when we meet complexity from the nervous system, raw, real, and unfiltered, we actually build the capacity and the congruence. And so our first practice is what that's about. It's a very short practice to give some shape and sound to what's present with you now, without editing and without needing to make sense. And it's a riff on what we call conscious ranting. And there's no need to be clear or wise, but it's really a chance for you to move with what's alive, what's raw, perhaps confused, hopeful, resistant, messy, or all of it, and to move it into a rhythm, a pulse, some language. And it's a practice just for you. And I know just to help this conscious ranting exercise, and don't worry, we'll tell you to mute yourself if you haven't done so. It can be very helpful. Just, turn off your videos for this practical experiment. But we've given you some prompts to play with. And I'll ask Sonja just to put them in the chat and I'll read them through one by one. And the idea here is that you either pick one or you just flow from one or the other. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And the prompts are: what I want to say but don't say is. What I'm tired of pretending is. What it really feels like is, if I could say the messy thing out loud, it would be. And the idea here is that once you've muted your mic, you've turned off your camera, we actually recommend that you grab your phone. There's a voice memo that you can use. It's on the settings of your phone. And just to rant and see where this takes you. How is it to be sitting in this time between worlds? What does it feel like? And to use one of the prompts to guide it. If you prefer to write, you can. But whatever you do, we'd like you to move. So don't sit still. But the idea is to really walk and move as you're doing this exercise. And not just to speak with words, but to let yourself express through your body. And it can be messy, it can be contradictory, it doesn't need to make sense, it doesn't need to be clear, but really giving yourself a chance to really tune into what is alive, what's sitting underneath, what am I editing, what am I not saying about what it's like, and what does it feel like to be in this space and in between this time between worlds. And just to help you kind of find a rhythm and a pulse, I'll play just some drumming music. It will be quite soft, but just to give you a sense of a rhythm or a pulse to tune in. And I don't know if there's any questions before we start with this. All right, so what I'll do is I recommend you turn off your camera. I see all of you are muted. I'll start playing the music, look at the prompts, and don't sit, but move and see what comes up in this conscious ranting exercise. So if you're still busy with your rant, just a small nudge to come back, finish your sentence. And when you're ready, just to turn your cameras on again. I'm very, very curious. Maybe we can just do some popcorn style reflections. What was that like? How did that feel? Were there any surprises? Anything new or new information that came up?
I had a surprise. The rant felt familiar because I've been doing it a lot. But what was really interesting was how I was frustrated by all the things that I know to be true and certain are now untrue and uncertain, and that instability has been very frustrating. And then it made me reflect on the people who have voted in the current administration in the US are the ones who are really disappointed, frustrated, and angry that their lives have changed so much. And so I recognized myself in them in a way I hadn't before. And it really caught me by surprise, because like I so want the old way to be true, but they wanted the old way to be true too, which is why they put in someone who was regressive and attached to an even older way of being. So it made me feel a common bond.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Was it hard? Easy?
Yeah, can I jump in? So for me it was hard, and you know, the first sentence, what I want to say but I don't say, I don't know, and realizing what I don't know to say, and what I don't know almost made me feel really uncomfortable, afraid, and yeah. But then I also said, well, let's continue, let's move. I don't know where I am. I guess I'm completely this messiness, this confusion. But yeah, I trust that something out of this will emerge. So thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Maybe I can add on the process. So I found the getting up and walking around critical. And somewhere, I don't know, after a minute or two, I sat down and I thought, okay, I'm going to start writing something. And it was over. So I had to get back up and I had to get kind of freed from this, like locked at my desk. I really like that. And I think it's almost impossible to do unless you're really moving around. That's what I felt. So I really valued that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Vuyo, I see you've got your hands up.
So I was led by tears, and I almost found my articulation in the tears. And it's yeah, I don't know if I found that surprising, but I found something in it. I think I have a lot of tears that I'm not aware of. Thank you.
Thanks, Vuyo.
Adrian here. I'm also happy to share probably after the last couple of sharings, and that is that I couldn't really rant. And maybe that's where I am now. I can often rant, but I somehow felt that I was feeling really joyous. And so I wandered around just doing completely crazy dancing, not crazy out of sorts dancing, just my own version of crazy, and making funny noises and occasionally saying the word rant. And then did it some more, nothing came, and I did it some more. And that was the end of my exercise. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, non-verbal is communication, right? So you were, yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can go. I think I felt I needed something to rant about. And the space that I'm in right now, I couldn't find something to rant about. And I think maybe like Adrian is saying, for me, if I need to rant, I rant right there. Like, sorry if you're not in a state to receive my rant, but you're getting it. So the space that I'm in now, I couldn't find something to rant about. I just walked around and just said random things that came to mind, and just the reflection of where I am.
Thank you, Celine. And yeah, maybe as a last kind of question, like, could you feel, and this is to the group, but like, could you feel something happening in your body? Was there like an electric, a charge, an aliveness? Was it a release? What did it feel like in your body?
I think yeah, because I stayed a lot in my head to try and find something to rant about, that it was only at the end when I'm like, perhaps I need to go into my body, but it was finished. But the bulk of the time I was staying in my head to try and find something.
Yeah, Mirjam, I can maybe reflect. I've had the I don't know if it's a privilege really, but I've had this ranting as homework from Mirjam for a while. And I find that if you repeat it, so the instruction is to do it every day for a number of minutes. And in the beginning, well, it's still difficult. It's still difficult, you know, and I get stuck in my head, like, what must I rant about? And then but what I discovered was how much I edit myself, and how I almost need to give myself permission to really go there, to let the tears come, Vuyo, or to say the things that, you know, one of the questions that Mirjam asked me that she didn't put in here was, what would you say that would get you canceled? It's like really allowing that flow, I found was quite liberating, actually. So all of the practices we're doing today are things that you can actually go and use. And so this one, in the beginning, I was very uncomfortable, but I've seen the method in the madness.
Of that method in the madness, yeah. All right, Sonja, do you want to share a little bit more about your complexity consciousness?
Yeah, I can share a little bit more. I'll bring that slide back up just so that you can see it. But you know, it's very much a working definition, and I'm also quite aware that, you know, this could sound a little bit out there or woo-woo, but that has kind of been part of the journey also, is I had to discover how to work with myself and with clients in a way where the complexity is no longer something that sits outside of them, but that we're very much entangled with. And what is really important for me here is this idea of, you know, complexity consciousness is something we remember. One of the things that we work with quite a bit is, you know, it's almost something that needs to be rewilded or untamed. It is something that is inside of us. It's this felt sense that we're entangled with the complexity. You know, and very, you know, in the beginning, and I still do this a lot with clients, you know, is to make this distinction between complexity and complicatedness. You know, this idea that, you know, we sometimes interact with problems and with systems that's predictable, that's not quite as messy. But even when that is happening, we are still within a broader context of complexity. Our lives are complex, our relationships, our inner worlds. You know, so this really is a little bit about reconnecting with the messiness that we that we know makes life worth living, and the messiness on the inside. And, so this is it's an expansion. Initially I had the words there, it's a shift, but it's not necessarily a shift. It's an expansion from or to and, to really embrace the ambiguity. And I think the world at the moment has enough. It's got a sufficiency of ambiguity for us. But how do we shift away from polarization to embracing an and? From prediction, to participation, of letting go of this idea that, we are working towards predictable outcomes. And I think sometimes even in a coaching role, we might say that we're not working towards specific outcomes, but there's still a subtle, we want to see that we're bringing a transformation. We want to see growth. We want to see impact, and so it's quite subtle. It's how do we shift from that way of being in the world to co-creation and participation, from control to communion, from answers to awareness. And this is not to say that we never need to be in control or that we never need predictability or answers. And this is why I'm thinking about this as an expansion. It's how do we step out of that very linear way of relating to the unknown, relating to complexity. And so this is about becoming attuned. It's about awareness. It's about sensing into patterns and being with paradox and sensing into potential. And so in a way, it's about stepping into a field of potential. One of the theorists that I really enjoy at the moment is Bonita Roy, who talks about complex potential states. And this is very much, it's not about seeing a system even, it's about understanding that, we're part of a field and we can attune to different things, to different potentials. And so this is about remembering that, there are certain wisdoms that we've severed. And some of this also comes through believing that we're individuals and not tapping into collectives. We need to think about rewilding, not just nature. There's a whole movement around rewilding natural environments, but rewilding ourselves, our ways of thinking and sensing. It's almost like, how do we undomesticate our minds and the language we use? We can have an entire session just on language. How do we reconnect, not just to each other, but to the unspoken, to mystery, to things that we can't rationally understand? And how do we make it okay to speak about these things, to bring the sacred, for example, back into our work, into the workplace, to untame? There are ideas that we've inherited around control and hierarchy and dominance. How do we untame the stories that we believe, and unwind some of the mental habits? I like to play with this idea of, using re-words and unwords. It's almost like we need to reunite. So it's rewilding, remembering, reconnecting, and then untaming and unwinding and unlearning. So how do we unwind this idea of, efforting, of our need to earn a living, and all of these unconscious drives towards performance and growth and outcomes and impact? And I'm seeing more and more of this with my clients. It's almost like people are tired of needing to have goals and everything needing to be measured and always needing to develop and always having, something to strive towards. There's a tiredness, and I think I feel it in myself as well. This continuous drive to want to become better. And so how do we unlearn some of these things, these stories that no longer serve this world we're stepping into? And going back to the Michael Meade quote, I believe this rite of passage is towards this. It's almost a backward step in some ways towards unlearning, rewilding, remembering a different way of being in conversation with the unknown. And so I thought maybe I can just put that out there. We're about to go into another practice, but how is this landing for you? How are you, what are you encountering in your work that this might resonate with, or just questions.
Sonja, if I can offer something maybe. For me, what is really interesting, so some people here might know that I've been involved with taking people into the wilderness to fast, to do vision fasting, vision questing work for a long time. And the interesting thing is that in all the years, the people that have signed up for these programs have predominantly been women, with a couple of men joining. What's happening at the moment is the men are joining. Like last year, this year, my programs are full of men that want to go to the wilderness and reclaim and rewild and unlearn. And it's kind of that, I think it's an interesting place where patriarchy is no longer serving men, which is a curious thing. And I'm just like, what's changed? I mean, nothing's really changed in terms of the invitation, in terms of the form, but who's showing up is different. And it's the men who are sick and tired of their well-adjusted careers. So I'd offer that. And I love this idea of working with re and un words. I wonder, yeah, and giving ourselves permission to be less goal-directed and outcomes-focused in the coaching work that we do. I think that's coaching I naturally enjoy more, but as a permission to just offer this. This is not goal-directed coaching. What does it feel like? It feels naughty to say that. It feels like you're coloring outside the lines when you say, we are not striving for outcomes here. You know, they're not going to be any great things in your productivity or whatever in your life and your sense-making that shifts. Those things might come or might not come. That kind of feels like, okay, I'm coloring back inside the lines. But just to say, no promises, let's just explore. It feels naughty. Yeah.
It feels naughty, Lucille, but I think it also, it feels inviting. And while I was kind of doing some research for this, you know, I looked at, I love words and understanding where they come from. And this idea of coach, you know, I wanted to see, where does that come from? And I didn't know, but it actually came from, I think sometime in the 1600s, of a coach, the vehicle that transported people. You know, so you get on a coach, like drawn by horses. And then it got co-opted as a metaphor because they started, you know, like coaches who worked with children to help them get better at maths and sports. And it was this idea of transporting people. I never knew that. I don't know if you knew that. But that feels like a very outdated metaphor because we're not transporting people anywhere. You know, but it's really interesting that you bring up this idea, you know, that men are coming, because I've been sensing for a while that there's a shift or you know, and going back to my re and un, you know, we're in a space where it feels like we are reuniting the things that shouldn't have been separated in the first place. And one of those is masculine, feminine. It's the, you know, and I can understand why men would be drawn to that, as I think women are. But you know, it's interesting. I almost sometimes I sense that, you know, for men, and this is just a complete, I don't have any evidence for this, but it's almost like the rewilding aspect is really speaking to men and women, the untaming, the undomesticating, there seems to be a bit of energy around that.
And curiously, with the coach metaphor, I'm certainly feeling an invitation linked to what you're saying, Lucille, an invitation into the journey as opposed to the destination. And that for me is exciting. I think there's also a personality type that can do this better than others, right? Where control is not is not a metric of measurement, and it's also not a modus operandi. I do think it gets easier. If only somebody would just ring the bell and say, this is what we're doing now, right? Without you having to figure it out for yourself. No, we're staying just in the journey. There's no destination. Just come on the coach. That's all we're doing. If all you're doing today is waking up and getting on the bus, then please know that you'll have finished the story, you know? And that feels like the invitation to me. Thank you.
And I think what might be helping this is that, you know, the shift in the external context is such at the moment that more and more people are realizing that you actually can't control everything. And goals and plans are, you know, it's almost the moment you set them or, you know, you create the plan, it's already, you know, irrelevant. And so I think that is creating a lot of anxiety also. And this is one of the reasons why we're really putting a focus on how do we manage our nervous systems in all of this? Because, you know, I can, just from my perspective, I understand that the world is uncertain and I can't predict everything. And, you know, it's actually quite ironic, you know, a few years ago, I had this like really big epiphany, like I tell everybody that you can't control everything, but then when it comes right down to it, I love being in control. I'm, you know, Enneagram 5 for any of those, you know, you would understand. But it really is, I think the invitation is for us to step into more of a congruence and to show up, I guess, with more courage. That's what Mirjam has been helping me with as well. To not keep pretending that, you know, setting goals and being in control is what people need. Anybody else?
Maybe I can share something. I think it's also not out there. This stuff is immediately available to us. And I wanted to share because I wanted to bring into this space a space that I was in last week, which was the launching of a poetry book by Malika Ndlovu. And I went, this was going to be a poetry reading, and I was a bit like, oh, am I really going to listen to someone read their poems? But the whole evening, which was only an hour and a half, was constructed in exactly these, the way for participation, communion, awareness, and collective. So the poetry book was called Grief Seed. So it's what are the seeds that come with grief? And it was a collective, 12 people had collaborated on it, and they were all there. And the audience was all invited to create something in that moment around the book. And we all stood back to back was one of the poems, but invited to bring in their own grief, their own songs. There was some drumming. And I realized that just like that, it's the old art of theater making, really. Just like that, it was all there. The participation, the communion, the awareness, the collective. And so these things are much closer than we think. And just with some intentionality and consciousness, we can create them. Just as you did with our rantings. We had a little experience right there. So yeah, then it doesn't have to be so out there all the time.
No, and I love that, Jo. Thanks so much for bringing that in, because that's exactly the key and the essence here. And also, it's a great bridge to the next practice, because often this feels overwhelming, scary. But the thing is, we really actually can lean into this collective remembering, this collective creating art together. And this next practice that we have, which is called a circular inquiry, does just that. It's very simple, but quite deep. And what's helpful to visualize it as like a conversation around the fire, really allowing each voice to be part of what I would call a shared pulse, a shared rhythm. And we'll be putting you into breakouts, and I think the group sizes will be between 4 and 6. And you're going to be doing 2 rounds of questions. And each round of questions, you'll be repeating the same question over and over. And not to get to the right answer, but to really surface what's alive underneath. So let me just explain the process. So there's 2 rounds of questions. And the first question that I want you to answer is the question, what brings you most alive? And for round 2, it's what are you done taming? What are you done taming? And don't worry, we'll broadcast these questions in your breakouts. And so what happens, we'll put you in a breakout and we'll give you a minute or so to decide on the speaking order and flow of this circular inquiry. Once you figure that out, the first person starts with asking the question. So the first question is, what brings you most alive? So if I would be the first person, Sonja's next, I would say, Sonja, what brings you most alive? And Sonja answers, what brings me most alive is. And just popcorn style, you don't need to over-explain, just share whatever comes up. And you go round and round. So if you've answered the question, you turn to the person next to you. You know, Lucille, what brings you most alive? Lucille answers, what brings me most alive is. And you go round and round for 6 minutes or so. And then we'll give you a little prompt and you move on to the second question, which is, what are you done taming? And again, there, you know, I would ask the question, Sonja, what are you done taming? And Sonja answers, X, Y, Z, I'm done taming with, or I'm done taming X, Y, Z. And you just keep going again, 6, 7 minutes. Really, you know, try and see if you can find a rhythm, a pulse, no right or wrong. Just let it be stream of consciousness, whatever comes up. I don't know if there's any questions before we put you in the breakouts.
Yeah, I'm not an English native speaker, so I don't understand what means down taming.
So what are you done taming? The way that you could also interpret it, what we normally play with is, what are you letting go of? And untaming is really like, what are you letting go of? What do you choose to not condition yourself to? But I think it would be helpful to hold it as, what are you letting go of? Sonja, do you have another way of explaining this?
I think it's kind of, what are you finished taming? What are you no longer willing to tame? I think that is the and yeah, I think letting go, it's similar, but I think there's just a slight emotional difference between the two.
Yes, Retha.
Does taming refer to controlling or conforming? Or what do you mean with taming? I'm not quite sure. Is it sort of conforming to culture or to rules and that type of thing, or spending energy on trying to do things that you don't want to do anymore?
Yeah, I think it's all of that, Rita.
Okay.
It's almost like where you've allowed yourself to be domesticated, I guess. But if it's easier, you know, you can just go with, what are you letting go of?
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready with the rooms. I don't know if there are any questions still, but yeah, so step 1, just decide the sequence, hey, Mirjam, and then I will let you know when you can switch over to the next question. So 6 minutes on question 1, and then I will let you know when it's ready for the next question. I think welcome back, everyone. Mirjam and I are super curious every time we run this exercise to just hear what was that like, what emerged, you know, was there shifted? You know, I find that repetition, like being asked the same question over and over again, you know, like, did anything surprise you? What shifted? What did it feel like?
For me, I on the first question, it was like there was a building of excitement. You know, it was like it started giving me more energy. And on the second one, I found that we had a lot in common, and there was like a repetitive themes coming through, and I was wondering whether we were only women in the group, whether it was a gender theme or not. But yeah, just that we share certain things that came through. But it was wonderful how you actually didn't have a choice on participating, and you had to dig deep, and you had to think, and you had to come up with something. And already the things that surfaced for me was surprising for me.
I think that repetition, Jackie, the having to, as you say, it forces you to dig deep, to really surface something that's below the surface.
For me, also, just to echo what Jackie said, our group had 2 men in it. And I'd say we probably, from my perspective, probably had a similar experience to what Jackie said. I'm not sure they were the same themes, but definitely that building up of the happiness and the themes there as well. And just first time I did an exercise like that. So I found it really insightful. And also like how you share on it as well, in terms of because of the way the question's asked, and then you answer with the statement, and then you ask the question. It's a completely non-judgmental space. There's no one saying, acknowledging it, and then well, there might be, but we kind of operated in that way where we just moved around, and you could maybe pick up on body language or anything like that, how people were really just reverberating with what someone else said as well. But thank you.
So maybe just to follow on that, to ask, we wondered whether you were supposed to ask the question each time, or whether you just went around in response to the one question.
So if I understand it right, so you keep asking the question and the person answers by framing and then asks again. So there is something about that it really gives you a sense and response. Yeah, and a collective kind of pulse.
Okay, but even though we were done taming, getting it right, we got it right.
Yeah,
I think there's also a sense of ritualizing it by just asking the same question over and over. That also, I think, creates a different kind of container.
I'd love to join in that. Did someone come in? Mirjam, did you have something?
No, same. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I appreciated. I was thinking of it like you were saying, a ritual, and it's almost like a block. So it creates a rhythm. And there's something about, as coaches, our job, as I see it, or I'm seeing it more and more, is so simple, and it is like the repetition of what else, right? Like that depth, that just creating container. And someone brought up co-regulation, so a lot of it is like the vessel of ourselves, creating enough of a wide width and depth, and then just the language can be so simple. So I love that we were playing with the language of like and then practicing the 2 rounds. And then the second insight I wanted to bring forward had to do with the second question: what are you done taming? And it was interesting how you could, and we had different types of answers, but there was the like answering of the thing you're letting go of or the thing you're becoming in response to the thing you're letting go of. So like an example for me was, there was like a letting go. There was like I'm no longer going to tame my intelligence. I'm not going to like make it small, but there was another one. Like I have an old story about being an orphan. It's like, I'm not going to tame that anymore. Isn't really the answer to the question, but it's like what occurred. So it's an interesting play. Someone can hopefully reflect this back, what I mean a little more succinctly and clearly, but there was just like this interesting mindset shift.
Yeah, thanks, Shia. And I think part of that last question is because there actually is a belief or an identity or something behind the word untaming. We don't normally use that word. It's normally, what do you let go of? And I realized, and I was naming it when you are all in the practice, that it's actually that word. I would call it's a circuit breaker. It's a circuit breaker. It actually blocks aliveness, and so it's harder to get into the groove. So that was just a very interesting observation from our side, that I realized, ooh, that's a block word. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And Renata, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah. So the first round, the question and the tone in the first round was really quite warm, and I think we all picked up a certain pace around that. And then with the second question, I was really surprised at this very curious sense of annoyance that I found coming up with myself. Why am I still busy with these topics? Why haven't I tamed? Why are they in the way? And I think I'm kind of trying to figure out myself why that bubbled up. But it has something to do with the impatience around myself. Why is this still an issue? Why can't I just confidently say, I've dealt with this? That's kind of how I'm trying to make sense of that sense of annoyance and that almost like anger with myself. I thought that was interesting. And it probably did come out of that word of what are you done with? Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Renata. Yeah, I recognize that. Yeah, I recognize that annoyance. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a sense of should for me. It's like I should have been over this by now. Then it just is that almost self-judgment that comes.
Yeah, for me, it provoked another question that I feel like I needed to answer before I could answer that question. And that is, in what ways am I taming myself? In what ways am I domesticating myself? And so that was kind of like when you said the circuit breaker, that, yeah, it broke a circuit to the extent that I had no answer because I'm not aware of how I'm taming myself. So in that, it will provoke a very interesting inquiry as I go forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Robin.
Really difficult question. Interesting as you get to answer it. Because what am I done taming? Dogs, because I feel they need to be free and wild. What am I done taming? Fear, because I don't want it with me anymore. Like I can be taming things that I want and love, and also taming things that I don't want. So what am I unleashing when I open my gates? Oh, this is such a crazy hard question. What am I done taming? I'll be working with that for a while. Thank you.
Thanks, Vuyo. Pete.
Yeah, a bit of a theme that came up in our group was some resistance with the absolute finality of untaming, the theme of work in progress, as opposed to having reached the destination of untaming.
Yeah, I had a similar view as you, Pete. It was something I'm in the process of taming versus something that I've been tamed, and there was a distinctive energetic difference between the two. So the ones that when I voiced them out that I'm still in process, there was a internal hesitance. But the ones that I felt done with, I could speak more confidently into. And that was an interesting sort of interior thing to recognize about myself.
And I think what's coming up for me, Mirjam, is this is such an excellent example also of how something as simple as a question that you ask in a context like this can have unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And the importance of language. So talking about the felt sense of complexity, that's, it's one word can send can completely shift the texture of a session.
Yeah, and also because what I'm picking up underneath of it is that it's in direct opposition with our proposition here today, which is actually that we are already here. We are already here, we have already arrived, and there's nothing to do. And the question, the way that we phrased it, says the opposite, and makes us feel the opposite. So yeah, it's really super insightful. And it's also a question that we changed last minute. And yeah, super helpful.
And partly changed last minute because we thought I wanted to change it. I'll own it. It sounded a bit more clever. It was linking to the themes and so it's that's how easy it is. Rikus, you've popped up, so.
Yes, I'm only realizing now the ambiguity there. I was thinking about it in what have I given up trying to tame? But it can also mean what if I succeeded in taming?
Yep.
Yeah. Wonderful. I think, Mirjam, we're kind of at the time when we said we wanted to do the final practice.
Yeah, so this last practice, we don't really even have a word for it, but I would call it like a stream of consciousness little practice. And again, really...
Is this something that you're perhaps done taming?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait for you to experience this one, Vuyo, because Mirjam just threw me into this one with absolutely no warning.
Fabulous. Let's go.
Yeah. No, this is going to be an interesting one.
So in this practice, we're going to put you up in pairs, and maybe Sonja, you can just create the breakout for that. And again, it's building on the last two practices that we did, the conscious ranting, then the circular inquiry, to really speak from a deeper kind of sense, not the expert voice, not the polished voice. And we'll put you in breakouts. And one person starts by asking a question, and we'll give you 3 questions. And the idea is that you ask the question repetitively for 2 minutes. And you do that for each question, and really to allow for a sense and response. So one person is the person asking the question, the other person answers. I'll give you the 3 questions and then just run you through it. So the 3 questions, and we'll prompt you again in the breakouts, but the first question is, why did you become human? And so the person starting with asking the question, asks the question, person answers, and when they're done talking, you ask it again and again and again, and you do that for 2 minutes. And really the person answering, there's no right or wrong. As I said, stream of consciousness, share what comes up as you go. So first question, why did you become human? And the second question is, what does your inner child want? What does your inner child want? And the last question is, what do you want to bring into the world? What do you want to bring into the world? So when you come into your breakouts, just decide who goes first with asking the questions. We'll prompt you every 2 minutes to move on to the next question. And when you've done the first 6 minutes, you can switch roles and the person answering can start asking the questions.
So, Mirjam, just to clarify the way it works, is for the first 6 minutes, one person is asking and one person is answering. And it's 2 minutes on question 1, 2 minutes on question 2, and 2 minutes on question 3. Not 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. And then you swap and the other person asks.
Correct.
Right.
That's
Thank you.
100%, yeah.
I
And
will broadcast
we'll broadcast the questions also so that you know when to switch to the others.
and I'll put the questions also in the broadcast. All right, you'll have 15 minutes, so it's about 6 or 7 minutes per person. So it's 2 minutes per question, 6 to 7 minutes per person. Okay.
Well,
I think everybody should be back.
Almost.
I think there's still a few more.
There we go.
Let's do.
Okay, I think everyone's back now.
Yeah, so as always, Sonja and I are very curious. What was this like? How was this?
It's wonderful to be listened to. It's enlivening and yeah, very powerful to have someone give you their attention.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, and the quality of that attention really opens up a stream of consciousness. It's like not needing to go anywhere specific, of really just allowing it to emerge and unfold, and yeah, with some new insights, new connecting points. Thank you.
For me, we had such fun. Because we're saying, as you started, you feel like you have to make sense. And as the same question keeps on coming, and then you release yourself to stop making sense. And then it was fun all the way.
I loved the questions.
Yeah, I'd certainly not had those questions posed before with that many iterations. And I think it's fascinating because you could spend much longer. So to echo what was said earlier about having someone listen, and in a way, I almost wanted to hold on to everything that the other person was saying at the same time, because it was as important to hear as it was for them to say. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, Adrian.
It's I'll reflect personally, I feel so tender-hearted, and in both the giving and the receiving. Well, the giving of attuned attention and the receiving of depth like that, and then yeah, the multidimensionality. It was a really beautiful way to connect with another human being, get to the heart of things, heart of the matter. That simply, that's maybe one of the takeaways from the complexity, from the conversation this morning today. There can be so much in the simplicity of a question.
Yeah, like the question, what can you create when you stop striving, right? And just rather curating and holding space for, with small practices to really yeah, to really get a sense of what's already there. And I'm curious, with some of the things that were showing up in the circular inquiry, specifically with the second question, was there a way to give voice to that, or to get insight into what was underneath it by doing this last practice? Was there any insight or release around what was happening in the circular?
Can you
Mirjam,
please
can
ask
you
that
answer that?
question again?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
In a
It
different way.
sounds so good. I just can't quite. One more time.
Shame, do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Yes, sorry. Vuyo
Sorry,
and I were
yeah.
laughing at our talking over each other. Yes, we would like the question repeated, please. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so the what was happening in the circular inquiry, especially around the second question with the word untame and kind of what was bubbling up around underneath the surface. Was there something that happened in this last practice that gave more insight in that, or was there a way to release that or give voice to what was felt in that second question in the circular inquiry?
Okay.
I'll happily go. I think some of it maybe also relates to my Enneagram. I found the first inquiry really amazing because it was 5 of us sharing in a fast scenario and in a not judgmental way or whatever. But the second one was 2 of us. And there was although the first one might have led up to it and exposed us to the circular questioning, the second one for me, I resonate easier with in terms of intimacy. But I found both the exercises extremely powerful. Thank you.
So that's interesting. I think that I found the circular one had a really nice pace, and it stopped me from thinking about it. While with the second, because it's a one-on-one conversation, it's a lot more focused. I completely stayed in my head, which I struggled with. And yeah, so I think reflecting on the pace of that circular question, and that almost like, I think you said the word rhythm at the time, that you really, through that continuous questioning, I felt I could really respond to that, and it got to a core of me that I couldn't get to in the last session because of the one-on-one, exactly because of that. So I just stayed in my head.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Renata.
So Mirjam, I think we can probably wrap up, especially if Lucille still wants to make an announcement. So I'll just go ahead and say thank you for everyone who showed up, and I hope that was, and thank you for participating, and I hope that was valuable. And yeah, it's always fun to spend time with your community, Lucille. So yeah, that's it from me. Mirjam, I don't know what you want to share.
Yeah, same. Just deep gratitude for today's session and for everybody that showed up. And if this sparked something in you and you know, stirred something beneath the surface, Sonja and I are running a small program that's called Raw Nerve, and really to help you kind of dive deeper into this complexity consciousness and felt experiences, not just for yourself, but also for your clients. It's 3 live sessions, deep practice, not to add more, but to meet more. And I'll just share the link in the chat. I know it will be shared as well in the email with the replay, and you can just have a peek and look at that on your own.
Thank you, Mirjam and Sonja, for taking us into what it means to swim in the ocean of complexity. to be in it, not to think about it. Really good food for thought. And in this last round, I had the beautiful privilege of being in a breakout room with Mirjam Hyman. And one of the things that she said was that she wants to bring peace into the world. And so just an invitation to everyone who is also interested in peace and its intersection with the Enneagram and the work we do. The International Enneagram Association is hosting World Enneagram Day this Saturday. It is a free event. It runs from 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Central European time, South African time, which is 8 a.m. Eastern time, for about, I think, 14 or 16 hours nonstop online. And you can register for free, whether you're a member of the International Enneagram Association or not. Go check out the program. I will be hosting and in a conversation with Jerry Wagner and Frederick Kuhne from about an hour and a half into the program. We'll be talking about different perspectives, from diplomatic to psychological to other ways of being in the world, and how the Enneagram and peace intersect. But there's other amazing things happening from different chapters in the Enneagram world. So please join us for that. And for those of you that don't know about the Enneagram conference in Minneapolis in July yet, if you are in a place where you can join the Minneapolis conference, it's towards the end of July. Please look at the International Enneagram Association website and come and play with those of us that will be there. Thank you so much, Sonja, Mirjam, and everyone here. Let's unmute and make a wonderful noise together. And let's just all say goodbye to each other at the same time. Glorious noise. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye.